So this is a quick example of using Adobe Dynamic Link. We're going to do this both with Photoshop and After Effects. So this is just a short commercial sequence here. Let's assume this is a Nike commercial. And we just want to put a tagline at the end with the logo. So we're going to use both After Effects for the tagline and Photoshop for the logo. So what we want in this particular shot right here is as this guy comes down, as his leg goes across screen, we're going to do a wipe of the Just Do It tagline. And we're going to do that in After Effects. So we're going to take this clip and we're going to turn this clip into an After Effects composition. So we can do this in two ways. Select it, go to File, Adobe Dynamic Link, replace with After Effects composition. Or you can just have the clip selected, Control, click on it, or right click on it and choose Replace with After Effects Composition. So I'll do that. And it's going to open up After Effects if you don't have it open yet. If it's opened, it'll just bring up this dialog to create a named file and to put it somewhere. So we'll call this Tagline. And we're going to save this to the same folder that I have the Premiere project in. Create a new folder called AE for After Effects, and I'll put it in that folder. So here we are in After Effects, and you will see that we have that clip in After Effects. If we look in Premiere, here's the clip. It's no longer the clip as it was, it's the After Effects project clip. So it's linked to After Effects. So let's do this graphic here. We're going to type the tagline, Just Do It, in the frame. So I just chose the text tool, clicked on the frame. You'll see it created a new empty text layer. And we're going to use the impact font because that's what Nike uses. Just Do It. And we'll kind of place it. Let's play this through and we'll have it so as the front of the leg wipes across, it's going to reveal it. So the way we do that is we're going to use a mask. To create the mask, we're going to make sure that the text layer is selected. Choose the rectangle tool, and we're going to draw a rectangle around the tagline. And you'll notice as I draw it, it reveals it. And we're going to automate this to wipe across the text along with his leg. So the way I would do that is we're going to go to each point on the mask and just over time have it move across. First thing I need to do, if I go to the mask properties, we're going to click the little stopwatch here to add a keyframe and initiate animation for the mask. You'll notice we now have a keyframe at the beginning of this timeline. I'm going to move across, and as I move across, I'm going to just adjust these 2 points to match with the front of this leg. When you want to select a single point right now, I'm going to go to the selector tool. Right now I have all the points selected. If I shift click on a point, it'll unselect it, but then if I click on it again, it'll select just that. So now I just selected that one and click down here and I'll select this one. And that's for our first keyframe. So I'll just move a little farther in the timeline. I'm going to go do 3 points. So it's usually better to just do 3 points so that way you get the speed right of the wipe of this mask. So I'm going to this point and I'm moving it, and going to this point and I'm moving it. So again, just to remind you, if you have all the points selected and you want to just select one point, hold down Shift, click on a point, it deselects it, and then click on it again, and that'll select it. So you notice we have 2 keyframes now reflecting the mask path. And I'll just go to the end. I'll drag these 2 points here and here. So now if we wipe across, all right, so the mask is working, but it's doing the opposite of what we want. It's actually taking away the text, and we want to reveal the text. So simple, we just need to invert the mask. Right now the mask is making everything outside of it transparent and everything inside of it visible. If we invert the mask, it's going to do the opposite. So now the text has appeared. As the mask wipes across, it becomes visible. Deselect the mask so we can just see it. See, okay, then we have the wipe going on with the leg. In Premiere, and you'll see, there we go. The clip is reflected in Premiere. So I'm just going to do a couple things to this to make it look a little better. Go back to After Effects. So if you notice, we kind of have a hard line on this wipe. And it's kind of a little less forgiving. If you don't quite have the mask line to the leg. You can sort of see it more likely when it's sharp. So we're going to soften it up by just going to mask feather, go to the middle of it. And we'll bring feathering up a little bit, clicking and dragging over the numbers. So we'll try that. You can see now it's a little softer and it just seems a little more believable. So now we're going to try one more thing, and we'll use a Photoshop file for this. We're going to add another wipe. If you look at the end where the dirt kind of falls downward, we also want to have this text wipe away downwards. And to do that, we're going to use something other than a mask. We're going to use a gradient wipe. I have my text selected. We're going to go to Effect, Transition, Gradient Wipe. So what a gradient wipe does is it references a gradient, which is transition from one color to another, or it can be transition from black to white, which is what we're going to use. To do that, we're going to create a Photoshop file to use as a reference and to create the gradient on. We're going to go to Composition, Save Frame as Photoshop Layers. Create the new file. I'm going to create a PS folder inside of my project folder. We'll call this gradient. Now we're going to go to that folder and now open up the gradient in Photoshop. We're not really going to use these layers, we're just using them for reference. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a gradient over this. So I'm going to create a new layer, call it gradient. Go to the gradient tool, make sure that layer is selected. Make sure we have black and white selected. I'm just going to draw across the frame to create this gradient of us going from white to black. But I want the transition to be a little bit closer to the text, so let's try that again. You have to be careful because if you don't drag this up perfectly straight, it gives you a canted gradient line. And that looks a little canted too. I think that looks right. So I save this. We're going to import the gradient into After Effects. We're going to choose the layer. We don't want to bring in the other layers. All we really want is this one layer. So we clicked Choose Layer. And you see I have the other layers to choose. I'm choosing gradient and clicking OK. So now we have the gradient in here. And I'm going to drag that to the bottom because we don't really want to see this. We're only using this as a reference. I'm actually just going to shut it off. And let's go back to the Just Do It layer. Go to the Effects window. Here's the gradient wipe. And we need to go where it says Gradient Layer and set it to the gradient. So now to reference that. So what happens, you'll notice, as I bring the transition completion value up, we kind of wipe across the Just Do It. But what's happening, just like it was happening before, it's wiping up. We want it to wipe down. So we can invert the gradient and it'll do the opposite. So all we need to do now is we need to animate this value here. So let's see where we want this to start. We're going to start like right there where we see this green or this sand starting to fall. We're going to add a keyframe. So I open up gradient wipe. You'll see there's the keyframe. And I'm going to, let's see, once that stuff is down, we're going to raise the transition completion value. So now you'll see it's kind of falling down with the sand. We're going to soften it up a little bit, transition softness. See how, just like the feathering, it just softens the edges there. So that looks pretty good. However, we're going to go back to the Photoshop file and I want to do a little bit more with this. We're going to add some grain to it so that way this wipe is a little less clean. So I'm going to select my layer again and we're going to go to Filter, Noise, and we're going to choose Add Noise. And what we're also going to do is we're going to make sure that monochromatic is selected. And let's see, let's adjust the amount. That's way too much. I'm going to go lower on the amount. There we go, because we don't want this black to disappear too much. We'll click OK, and now we're going to save it, and it'll update in After Effects as well. All right, so now you see as it comes down, it's a little more of a grainy look. If you don't want to see any bounding boxes, if you deselect all the layers, you'll just see a clean frame. This is the work area, and if you're rendering, pre-rendering, or if you want it to loop, you want to set this to the default range. Let's go a little faster with that. So to make it faster, all you have to do is move a keyframe. So I'm just dragging this keyframe this way. A little more. Okay, so we're going to save it and let's look at it in Premiere. So there it is in Premiere as well. So now we're going to work with a Photoshop file. And for that, what we want to do is we're just going to bring in the Nike logo as a Photoshop file. Any sort of images, still images that I'm bringing to Premiere, I usually like to go through Photoshop as opposed to just doing it in Premiere. You get a little more flexibility of tweaking the files, filtering them, making them look a little better in Photoshop than you would in Premiere. At the same time, I also don't like the text tool in Premiere. I prefer to use Photoshop. It gives you more control over the text. We're going to create a new Photoshop file. So to do that, we're going to go to File, New, Photoshop file. It's going to create a Photoshop file, the exact measurements of the sequence. We're going to put this in the Photoshop folder. We're going to name this logo, click Save. We have the Photoshop file here in Premiere, and if we go to Photoshop, see the logo Photoshop file opened here. To find the Adobe logo, and this is just sort of a tip when you're looking for images like logos online, it's always good to look for images that have alphas. What alpha is the transparency information. So if you have the logo on a transparent background, if it has an alpha, that will indicate to Photoshop or to After Effects or to Premiere that this information in the background is transparent. And I'm also going to choose transparent background to filter. So here we are, we have a bunch. These theoretically all have transparency in the background. These probably do, although it doesn't indicate that. But if you take a look at these, this checkerboarded background, that indicates transparency. And you'll see this is what we'll see in Photoshop when we bring the image in. So I'm going to go with this first one because it's pretty big. It's 293 by 1689, which is certainly big enough for our frame. Control click on it, save image as. Saving as a PNG, that's what you want. If we're saving as a JPEG, you're not going to get alpha information. So find a different image. You want a PNG, and we'll save that. Actually, get rid of this beginning. Open that image in Photoshop. Okay, so you can see here's the transparency grid behind. So we know this is an image with an alpha. So if I place this in front of another image, we're going to see the image behind. Do Command A to select all and copy that. And we'll go to the logo PSD and we're going to paste it in there. So you can tell this is a huge image compared to the frame we're working with. So I can just transform it to shrink it down a little bit here. If you don't initially see your transform controls, and even though this box is checked to show transform controls, we're not seeing the little bounding box to make this smaller. So what I'm going to do is do Command T, and now we have the bounding box. I'm just going to shrink this down to size. I can also go and scroll this up here if I want to change the value. And we'll kind of put it in the center of the frame. So I actually want this white, not black. So we're going to invert the image. Make sure I have the layer selected. Go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, and now it's a white image. Save it. Go to Premiere. We'll drag this to the second layer. And there we go. So I want to change the size. Now, if I don't have the Photoshop document opened up like I do, I would just control click on it and choose Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Let's make it a little smaller. Make it smaller. Save it. Apply transformation before saving. Let's go back to Premiere. And there we go. So now it's a little smaller. And there we go. Now, let's say that we're playing this back. And as we got to the After Effects file, it got really kind of slow and jittery because it was a very dense After Effects file. There was a lot going on there. So we could also render this so it will become a video clip. To do that, we're going to control click on it, choose Render and Replace. We want the source sequence. We'll use the Avid DNX codec. That's fine. Leave this preset as it is. We're going to include handles and click OK. And it'll take a little bit to render it. So now if we zoom into this, you'll see it's been replaced by an MFX file, which is the container for the Avid codec. Play it back. You'll notice the line above is yellow. So it's going to play back as well as the other video clips are playing back. And then if I want to edit this once again, select it, control click on it, and choose Restore Unrendered, and it'll switch back to the After Effects file. I can then go and edit this in After Effects. And that's a quick overview of the dynamic link process with Photoshop and After Effects.